A warm welcome to you all. My name is Rose. I'm new content strategist at the Berlin School. And I'm welcoming you on behalf of the Berlin School and our speakers today, Marilia Lobo, who is Director of Strategy and Learning Innovation, and Barry Mowszowski. He's an independent strategy director with more than 2 decades experience in senior strategy roles at agencies in tech hubs, including San Francisco, Sydney, and New York, and he's joining us very early in the morning from Sydney. I appreciate everyone coming, and it's certainly not something we took for granted in this rather chaotic time for many of us, but it's something that I think we all appreciate more than ever in times like this, having a chance to exchange our perspectives, experiences, insights, to come together in what will be the new normal, as Barry said. So good that we start familiarizing ourselves with having a community in this way. When we first decided on our topic for this webinar, of course, we didn't realize how much we would find ourselves navigating ambiguity. Now it seems like we were looking into a crystal ball and we have a lot of ambiguity ahead of us. And that's why we're all here and talking about it tonight. And we just want to make sure that there are forums. We're going to continue having webinars. So keep your eyes open on our social media channels. We really want to make sure that people have a place they can come and, as I said, learn, exchange ideas, and talk to the experts. So without further ado, passing the virtual mic over to Marilia.
Thank you, Rose. Welcome, everyone. I'm really happy to see both Barry and I. I'm working at the school now, but both Barry and I, we are alums from our MBA. And it's really great to see in this conversation participants, alums, CCLP alums, and new Berliners, new creatives. And as Barry usually says, this is our intellectual date, and we had numbers of discussions when we curate the content for the Kant Creative Leaders Program, the CCLP, this is the acronym. And we had hundreds of conversations about the industry, about creativity, about disruption. And one day we thought, okay, why don't we put this live and start doing a webinar open to people and start this conversation. And here we are, Barry. Who could imagine when we planned this year that this would be the situation? You in Sydney in your apartment, I'm here in Berlin, and everyone from home. So before we jump into the CCLP topic, or the topic about creativity, ambiguity, and authenticity that I'm sure will permeate our conversation, given your expertise, how are you seeing creative business being changed already by the move to remote work? What is your experience with your clients, with your teams and projects globally in creative businesses?
Morning, everyone from Australia. It's 5 in the morning, so if I sound like the Cookie Monster from Sesame Street, I apologize. What's interesting is, and I say this with a degree of consistency globally, is that, and tell me if you guys relate to it as well, is that there's a sense of a bit like dropping a grenade, and then everything's become fragmented. So working from home, if you're a leader, has actually signaled a real sense of vulnerability, because how do you control people when they've dispersed? How do you maintain a sense of culture and a sense of normality? And the command control structure is very easy if you're a creative director managing a team, or if you're presenting work to a client. But a lot of it's been played out through Twitter. People seem to be sharing vulnerabilities, some tips, very generous, like a lot of generosity and sharing of, here's tools, this is how we're doing it. On LinkedIn, it's a bit of a vanity project of screenshots, all different faces. Look how I'm managing my team. We're talking every day, happy faces. And the next step and the gap will be, how do you maintain and motivate people on a daily basis? You start your day with a call, you have a check-in call, and the routine of that is actually being mirrored by a lot of how schools are educating their students now. And schools, I don't know in your countries, but in Australia, schools seem to have seen the trend of what will happen and preparing for online learning in ways that businesses are grossly inefficient in designing for that. So businesses will follow and learn from how schools have automated learning and structure, because children need structure as much as people in businesses as well. So the hard part is how working from home and connecting disparate teams as well, how does that functionally work? You know, if we were, Marilia joked about the topic of CCLP in 2020 is about navigating ambiguity in the age of data. Had we been Nostradamus, like, we would have invested in Zoom 6 months ago, because that stock price has skyrocketed, because Zoom's become like the toothbrush necessity for all businesses. I mean, webinar used to be oh my God, killed myself, I don't want to participate in another bloody webinar. But there's 25 of you on this webinar now, and this has become the new connectivity tool for people. So the key question is, how do you maintain a creative culture in an age where this is the new normal, where it's screens? How do you have that vulnerability of a session where you look at people and say, this is my starting point for an idea, what do you think? It's going to be really awkward to navigate that sea of ambiguity creatively on a screen. That I think is something that Saudi Arabia, you know, Rio, Sydney, New York, everyone's going to be facing that clunky awkwardness of, okay, but how do we make it work in this forum now? That seems to be the new normal.
And I think it's nice to share. We discussed this before. We learned that in our MBA, and we discussed a lot about psychological safety, and especially in the context of creative teams, this combination of safety and accountability to build trust. I think for creatives, the crisis that we are living, it's a lot about building trust, real trust and deep trust for this kind of remote work to happen. And this 2x2 matrix in psychological safety, I think it's quite helpful to think about this topic. We discuss when we talk about Amy Edmondson with the Fearless Organization, and especially now it applies a lot to the creative environments, right? I think that this was something we were discussing even without imagining, but it's this combination of being held accountable and having a safe space and safety to share your ideas, to do your check-ins, to have your frames, to have your routines. Maybe this was the space that was lost or in the past was not in the focus point or in the attention of leaders. And now with the pandemic, it's essential.
Yeah, and also, you know, our industry, especially ad agencies, and I say this having come from that world, like a lot of you would, our industry is excellent at selling bullshit to the marketplace. Everything's fine. We're under control. Clients give us more money. We want to win every pitch. And now with these new shifts in circumstances quite dramatically globally, a lot of those businesses, a lot of the faults in those businesses, in the business model and the inadequacies of the business model are all actually being laid quite bare. So you've got very senior leaders saying, shit, how do I do this? You know, what do I do? Because people are looking to me for direction, but we're not sure. If you're in a project-to-project model, the people who run these businesses are awake at night now thinking, how do I pay people's bills? And then when you couple that with, and this is something that, Ada, you'll remember we got into, in a couple of people from CCLP 2019 are on this call, when you then look at people's side hustles in businesses, how people have diversified risk for, I'll work in an agency as a creative director, but I'll have a couple of things on the side. How do you now reconcile that as a leader where people have more time to work from home and they're more worried about their day jobs? So they think, I'm going to do more of the hustle to get income coming in, because people are worried about the sustainability of the business model in the economy that they're working in. So I think the whole notion of CCLP 2020, and you'll talk about Khan being shifted to October, emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence is the whole pillar that the Berlin School is built on. It's to have the emotional awareness to say, as you said, about the safety of, I don't have all these answers, but I'm going to be vulnerable with the people I lead and manage and say, how do we have a consensus-based approach to getting to this outcome? And not being the command and control issue, which a lot of men tend to have, which is, I have all the answers, I'm going to convince you I'm right. So the vulnerability, ironically, is where the world is now. And that's the core foundation of the theme of 2020, navigating in the age of ambiguity.
Yeah. Now that you are jumping on the topic of CCLP, I will use this opportunity to to tell everyone, probably you already know that Cannes Lions announced the festival will happen in October this year instead of June, and our program with the festival happens in this period. And last year, Barry, was your first time designing and doing all the curation of the program with me and leading the CCLP experience. How would you summarize 2019, looking ahead and connecting to this big change, this paradigm change that we are facing now?
So the theme from 2019 was leading with brand experience, which I know sounds quite broad, but strategically it had to be, because with the Berlin School, the way we designed CCLP, it has to be inclusive of everyone. I mean, we had people from the government Ministry of Education, Housing in Saudi Arabia through to an HR person from a mining business in Brazil. So strategically speaking, it has to be a camp that everyone could be a part of. And in 2019, we interrogated the challenges of CMOs staying in their jobs for an increasingly short term, and how that influences top-down leadership and how agencies are suffering from the lack of leadership from clients. And that was one of like the 9 or 10 different spheres that we got into. And the way we design CCLP is that this is not like a manufacturing iron. It's not like the iPhone 12 is going to be similar to the iPhone 11 with a couple of tweak and benefits. It's literally about customization based on where is the industry at and what do people need. And even the fact that we've anchored CCLP 2020 in this theme where it's around how do we leverage data to navigate the sea of ambiguity, that will change, because now it's about remote working and managing people in very fragmented ways, which will be increasingly a key part of the theme of the conference. And we'll get into it in a bit about how we design CCLP, but the key theme is that it's designing a program where, you know, last year we had 24 leaders, or maybe 26 from 14 countries. And it's about designing a program which addresses the subconscious needs of those leaders, because we work very hard in forums like this to understand what's on your minds, what are the challenges you're facing, but then combining that with the 4 to 5 days of rigorous learning combined with the best-in-class leaders from around the world. So Martin Sorrell, Nick Law, who's gone from running Publicis globally to Apple. And literally, we hunt down the best speakers in the world to come in and create a safe environment that they're vulnerable to share their learnings with us, share their challenges in their day jobs, and then we extrapolate those learnings of how you can take those skill sets and be better at what you do. So in summary, CCLP program is about world-class thinking coupled with practical tools and frameworks that help you be a better leader, coupled with experiences where you can talk to the horse's mouth, people who are leading brands and businesses and organizations at the cutting edge of change, who can't bullshit you because they're in a room with 30 people with a closed door. They're not on stage at Cannes with their little talking points that are well rehearsed. And they learn quite quickly that it's a safe environment. And Adis can attest to this, who's on the call with Bob Greenberg. You know, you ask people very vulnerable questions, very established people, and they can't bullshit you. And CCLP is a very safe, special environment that, having experienced Cannes, you don't really get that. And these speakers don't get that either.
Barry, I'm just going to, sorry to interrupt, I'm just going to jump in and remind everyone that they can ask us questions. Send us your questions, please, about CCLP, about ambiguity, about what it means for you. Maybe you can expand a bit on that, Barry.
Sure. Well, the ambiguity part is that there isn't one bulletproof answer. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because everyone's working out shit as they go. Whether you're a CEO or you're managing 2 people now, the complexities, there's the elasticities, the complexities, but there isn't one bulletproof answer. And the Berlin School is determined to give you 9 ways in. And I think that's important to acknowledge, that there isn't one set approach. There's different ways to get to those outcomes. And our industry is constantly trying to survive and work out how to remain viable and operating as a business model, whether you're a freelancer or a chief strategy officer managing a company of people.
And if I hear you, when I hear you talking about all those things, just to summarize some takeaways, and we discussed that a lot in creative leadership. So basically what you're saying and what you're seeing in putting in the discussion is we're talking about vulnerability, so times of really embracing vulnerability, trust. So the crisis of the coronavirus is also a crisis of trust, and really build true trust in creative teams especially. So then we could argue and we can question how was this before, and I'm sure if we dive deep, we will see that it was not so, the trust was not so deep. Then you talk about psychological safety and accountability and this notion of security. I'm trying just to summarize to everyone, if this is where you're heading, your thoughts are heading to.
Yes, and the only other piece of that is that ambiguity, what informed the theme of ambiguity was everyone's trying to eat each other's lunch commercially. You've got, there are no more lines. So production companies are media companies, content companies are ad agencies. And if you think about the ambiguity around creating a sustainable, viable business model and the shift to having teams of people that are more promiscuous, almost like working in an airport. And that is the new normal now. So full-time employees versus squad life will bring you in when you need to. Managing and leading through that change is ambiguous and very scary. Now it's just become much scarier and less predictable. So I think that's one of the key things that we want to do at CCLP. And the last thing I'll say is that brand purpose, what's interesting, this will be a huge piece, I think, in our program. Brand purpose used to be lipstick on a pig probably 5 years ago. Then at Cannes last year, we saw a lot of brands winning awards by being less evil. And now you see LVMH and all these brands pivoting their business models to be responsive to what society actually needs. So it's about value creation. And that is a very critical, important piece where suddenly it's about brands looking to less exploit people, but brands now actually pivoting and being more human. And I think that's interesting. So brand purpose has now become organizational value rather than just generating more profit. So that's going to be a key central piece. I think my gut tells me that you'll see a lot of that. And we'll be hunting down LVMH to participate in our room to share those experiences of how do you pivot a business model. So that's what I mean by this is a program where until the night before, we will be updating and modifying it to be as relevant and cutting edge as possible.
I have a question for you, Barry, about this new squad model. It's already happening, right? That's the evolution that's already in process. Yeah. And how can we now, either as creatives or as creative leaders, make that happen in a more smooth transition, make that transition more smooth? Do you have any suggestions?
One of the tools that I shared in CCLP 2019, the value creation framework that came from the executive MBA program at the Berlin School, which was a tool from an investment banking hedge fund type lens. In my program, I just applied that into a framework for how to manage and motivate people. And that works. And this is something that we'll share at CCLP again, where if you apply that to full-time employees, that's easy because there's an org chart structure. How do you create and how do you replicate that with someone who, if I'm Suleiman from Saudi Arabia, if I said to him, or frankly, even right now, I'm working on a project with someone in India, in Mumbai, who I met 48 hours ago through an introduction through the Berlin School, and a woman in Jakarta on a qualitative project that my client wants to pull the trigger on next month, where, by the way, Indonesia's on lockdown because of coronavirus. And in India, this woman's stuck in her house because it's not business as usual. But I have a client who thinks that because she's got a timeline, that the project has to kick off in April, qualitative research, talking to people about non-alcoholic wine. Now, that is the new normal. You have unreasonable client expectations in a world where it's not business as usual. How do I manage relationships with people that I need to scale up in 48 hours and put my reputation on the line to deliver a project in a squad-like fashion on a global framework? And a lot of it comes down to a proposal that you put in writing versus the reality of business as usual today and the turbulence of that. And it all comes down to trust, vulnerability, and transparency with a client. And we know that those are the relationships that drive, but how do you cultivate those and how do you do all of that in real time? That's been my last 3 days, is trust networks and scaling those and then saying, great, how do we pay you for your time? What is fair and equitable? And how do we win together? And it's not rocket science. It's just we're developing these skills to be more lateral and more nimble because there's no time. And that's becoming the new normal, whether you're running a business with full-time employees or, as I just described, the hustle of my day job this week. It's all ambiguous. And I'm sure the 26 people on this call, you can all relate to that in different degrees in your jobs. The good news is that we're developing more operational skill sets and less waffly bullshit strategy of, here's a beautiful keynote deck. I'm not sure you'll know what to do with this, but it sounds great. And now those lines are being blurred with, okay, what do I do with this? How does this become practical? So business is good because it's flushing out the bullshit now. And I think those are the people that will survive. And those are businesses that will survive, demonstrating change by actually saying, okay, how do we hustle to an outcome?
Can you or Marilia talk a little bit more about trust? Because I still feel like I'm trying to get a sense of what that means. And just a reminder, while I'm here, if everyone could mute their microphones, it's in the lower left side of your window, because I can hear some typing in the background.
Okay, so trust. I always, when we talk about trust, I always like to mention this 2x2 module from Amy Edmondson. And this 2x2 talks about the correlation between safety and accountability. So it's basically the correlation between an environment that people know they're accountable and held accountable for results. At the same time, they have a relationship that is close, that is safe, is the framework that Barry connected. And in the upper right, and everyone that knows academics know that a 2x2, and we learned that in our MBA, always the good thing is the upper right in a 2x2, so you want to be there, but always gravity brings you down. It's the learning zone. This is the moment, or this is the thesis that she advocates, that you learn when you are in an environment that you have a team that it's held accountable and knows the responsibility, knows that the outcomes are needed, but at the same time you have safety, you have a safe environment to share, to be vulnerable, to be authentic. And this is what this is what she calls the learning zone. And I think when we have this framework in mind, it's good to, it's a good way to think about how you develop trust and how trust is the means for learning. And also in this situation, I've been discussing with some of our faculty and industry experts. I'm sure we are in the learning school time now. We are really accelerating exponentially our learning. Barry, do you have something?
In the context of CCLP, everything Marilia said I agree with, but in the context of CCLP, we take trust as a framework to make it a safe, inclusive space. So, you know, our industries, whether you're working in a media agency, creative agency, or client side, our industries are all predicated on how many awards you've won, and it's about your own vanity and security of, I'm so valuable because I've won so many awards, and then you leave and you go to another company and then they pay you for the potential to win more awards, etc. When you come into the classroom with CCLP, you've got people who are going through a life crisis of, I've just sold my company, I've left my job, I don't know my purpose and what I want to do, through to, I'm a creative director in a high paid salary and I feel like a fraud because I don't really know what I'm doing and I've lost faith in what I do, but I'm working in this business and I have a team of people that I love, so I'm remaining loyal to them. And then you have people who are thriving at their careers who are just tenacious to learn more. CCLP is a very unique environment, and when you use the word trust, the whole way we designed the program, and we're very lucky in 2019 because there were unbelievable people. We've still got a WhatsApp group where everyone shares and is genuinely vulnerable of, my role was made redundant, can anyone help me find contacts? I need a trend report, can anyone share it? And the new normal is becoming more vulnerable and sharing with each other because it's about making other people better rather than proving why you're better than other people. And that is the key strategic lens of CCLP. It's no assholes, an environment where you can come in and go, this is how I feel, this is the stage of my life that I'm at. And then you have 11 other people go, oh shit, me too. I haven't really spoken about that. And it's a very safe place to just open up. And it was actually, 2019 was a very emotional space. There were lots of tears in the room, but in a really good way, because you become like this creative family where it doesn't matter where you're from, but it's a sense of belonging that increasingly our industry doesn't give people. So trust is a very real, meaningful thing. And every day of the program, you know, it's sweat and tears to make sure that it's value for people who do the program, but that Cannes is not just an Olympic shit show of how many awards people won and beautiful people on stage, but that there's meaning that it's anchored in. And the festival is built like the cherry on top of an experience, not the other way around.
Thank you very much, both of you. I love the Olympic shit show. That's going to stay in my mind of Cannes. It is.
That is Cannes.
We actually have a question now, so I'd like to put it out there for whoever wants to answer, or both of you. Do you think that this forced experiment of having employees working from home is going to have lasting changes on how agencies and other companies function? For example, we'd see policies that allow or even encourage people to work from home often.
Marilia.
Definitely. I think if there's something that we needed, it's happening. It's impossible to come back to this is the new norm. It's impossible to come back because it's not only a moment for companies to question themselves, so to their purpose, their mission, their way of working, their business model, but also for us. I heard from a friend also in a creative business yesterday saying, you know, it's really interesting that now we are relearning, or we are unlearning, as we like to say at the Berlin School, how to live in family again, how to live with our parents, and how to really have a conversation during dinner, how to engage with someone in the same space for 10 hours or so I think it's not only about business, but it's about the whole society rethinking. That we had, of course, the positive sides of technology and all the advancements. I don't buy this thing that, oh, in the past was better. No, in the past was not better. The only difference is that change is exponential now. This is the only difference if you look at history. But I think that there is no way to have no impact or a small impact. The new norm will be this one, and this, in my opinion, is the best takeaway. This is the positive side of everything that is happening. If companies can respond accordingly, companies, leaders, and everyone of us, like everyone, because this is also a matter of an individual decision to think your life and your business in a different way.
At last year's program, we invited someone who's far smarter than I am, far smarter, Tracy Brown. And what Tracy did, Tracy created the Meritocracy Manifesto. And after this webinar, you guys should Google it, because what she did was she wrote her point of view of the world, which is that increasingly the marketplace will reward people who can quantify and value their contributions. And Tracy, the way we design CCLP, it's like Lego pieces. But Tracy ran a full-day workshop with the group, teaching people different skill sets and frameworks on how you can quantify and value and reward financially people's outputs. And ironically, Tracy was far ahead of the curve, because that's where business is now. How do you, and if you're a manager, a lot of managers that I've seen, people trying to monitor, oh, is that person doing a yoga class when they should be working at home? And that's why you have teams doing structured calls. But ironically, you know, Tracy's Meritocracy Manifesto was ahead of its time in the sense of, how do you balance working from home with life balance? How do you structure a team when you're managing a team, saying, you know what, guys, mental health is going to be an increasing issue because we're spending more time with our children because the schools are closed. We're spending more time with our partners that we're actually not used to doing. So there's going to be a combination of an increase in childbirth, an increase in divorces, an increase in people leaving the jobs that they realize that they hate because they're actually spending more time at home, an increase in DIY and redesigning their homes because those have become the new home office. Working from home is going to be less command and control and more disruptive on a deeply personal level and professionally. And ironically, it's going to make leaders better leaders because they have to inherit skills that they don't really have. So it's a bit of a laundry cycle, which is why I actually am happy that it's in October, because having that window, we hope that economically we recover, but that we've got Marilia and I and the team have enough time to design an even better program that is even more relevant to how life has shifted as well. But definitely Google the meritocracy framework and Tracy, Tracy Brown. If you look at what the Berlin School is doing, and this is not like a selling comment, but the future of doing, which is something that Tracy, Marilia at the Berlin School and I have been working on together, it's instead of thinking about the future of work, it's thinking about the future of doing through the lens of creative makers. And it's about designing a better workplace for that workforce. And Tracy is a key pillar in driving that strategic thinking. So have a look at Tracy's thinking, and hopefully it resonates with you guys. And you should reach out to Tracy on LinkedIn because she's doing a lot of consultancy on a global scale.
Any more questions, Rose? Or I have a question for Barry if we don't have questions from the audience. No? Okay, Barry, we also talked a lot about this, and I think we need to discuss and put here also the word power in this new norm. How will power be affected? How will be power? How is power changing? The concept of power, and in your view, what is the shift between before coronavirus and after in terms of power?
What's interesting is that, if you looked at it, what's the ridiculousness of the coronavirus is that selfishly from an Australian point of view, and I don't know how this relates to your countries, but in the last 2 weeks, the world just suddenly tipped upside down. And power was, everything's in control. I know where my projects are, paying my mortgage. You had life kind of worked out. And now that everything's upside down, you're not in control of those things. Those timelines are not yours to predetermine. A lot of projects have been cancelled. And that sense of, I'm actually not in control of anything because I rely on other people to get to those outcomes.
I have a question for you. You were talking about Tracy, and that reminded me of the Meet the Experts podcast. And she talked a lot about pitching, or you both did in your study, and how it was a big loss for creatives, for agencies. Would you tell us a little bit more about that, and maybe especially pitching in these times?
Yeah, well, for any of you, of the 24 people who are on this call, if you work in agencies, you know that clients have blatantly said, we want to pay you and compensate you much less for what you put on the table. And a lot of businesses steal creative ideas and steal pitches with no need to compensate. So the shift has been from a creative agency and media agency model of, we will not participate in your pitches without compensation, because the millions of dollars in headcount and man hours that goes into pitching is not valued by clients. So there's a real sense of, how do you value things from a big business model top end, and how do you navigate that uncertainty, and increasingly trying to get people to say no. So that if you pay and invest in something, you'll value it much more. So now it's training businesses and clients to value and to take more strategic and commercial accountability of what you're asking people to do. Conversely, part of what Tracy has been pioneering is saying, from a freelance point of view, the vulnerability of a client saying, here is a pitch. The project that I reference, I'm pitching against big companies that have much bigger overheads. And the vulnerability for me as a freelancer is saying, I can't compete with those guys for scale, but what I can do is be transparent with you with pricing. I'm not going to charge you 4 times the multiples on this project, because I'm going to charge you for the work that I'm doing, and it has to be a win-win proposition. That is a very different, refreshing conversation for a client when you're saying to them, I'm not going to rip you off, because I'm not going to subsidize a lot of my other operating costs with the cost of you doing this project. That is becoming a very resonant message with clients that I'm finding, because clients are saying, you're right, I don't want to be ripped off. So they'll get bigger businesses to do X, and then they'll spread the Y amongst different partners, because people like working with people that they like working with. And that's some of the trends that Tracy and I are seeing in terms of selling. It's how do you quantify and value what you're selling? And how do you diversify the risk for clients to enable them to buy it? And even the vulnerability on Monday, I'm going to put that proposal on the table where this is the best approach, I think. These are the known unknowns on this project. But that's where it comes down to trust, like Marilia spoke about 10 minutes ago. Trusting that a client will take your blueprint and say, I don't know all the answers, but we can work this out together. And And that is increasingly a more normal way to work versus an agency saying, yes, we can do all of this. You know, you lie to the client that you've got all these services that you can deliver, and then you find freelancers on the back end, charge a fat margin, and charge it back to the client. That doesn't seem like it's going to cut it anymore in business. So the future of doing in the context, and thank you for the question, Rose, the future of doing strategic initiative where selling is part of that. And we'll share the links, guys. Like, now that you have time at home, unfortunately, listen to some of those podcasts, because people like Tracy are so smart, and the thinking behind how selling needs to shift. The podcast that the Berlin School invested the time in, that is dedicated just to that topic as well.
Yes, also with having flexibility to do their yoga class, how that helps creatives.
I just wanted to add that you mentioned, but it's nice to highlight. I think it's important to highlight that this is why it's not future of work. And the question was, will remote work change after all this crisis? It's the future of doing. It's everything we do. So we are discussing a new norm for the way we create and we capture value, a new way we sell, and a new way we measure, a new way we have relationships. So it's really a shift on the doing, and this is why way before, and as Barry said, Tracy, it has a brilliant work that we're doing this initiative together. It's not about work, it's about doing. It's larger than work.
We have a very concrete question now. I'm just changing gears. It's my team are scared that they might lose their jobs right now. And I don't know how to deal with this. I'm sure it will happen, and business is already going down.
Very. You are in the future. You are in the future in Australia, so maybe you have some good questions, good answers.
Well, the future is 36 degrees and sunny in Australia today. So the scariest answer to that is it's true. I don't know, out of the 23 people left on this call, I don't know any of us who could actually say, I'm sleeping fine at night, I've got lots of money in the bank, I'm not worried, my business is fine. So vulnerability of, oh shit, how the fuck are we going to navigate this? If we're being honest, that is the scariest part, is that there are no concrete answers. And from a managing teams point of view, I think the less bullshit people they manage, the better, because fear and uncertainty becomes contagion. It affects relationships. It affects people's families and well-being. It's going to affect people's health. So the hardest answer, whoever asked that question, the hardest answer is don't bullshit people. By saying, you know what, I actually don't know, and these are the variables that I'm working with, and this is how I will do my absolute best to protect you. That's all people are looking for, because people smell bullshit. And now, especially where managers can't manipulate you in a room, or your CEO can't coerce you because they're very persuasive and charismatic. Now it becomes very much raw and real of when you turn the laptop off and you say to your partner, I actually don't know how we're going to pay for the mortgage. That is what real life is. And you'll see a lot of people will choose to stay loyal to a business because of their manager rather than the business that they used to go into on a daily basis habitually, now that they're working from home. So that is the vulnerable thing from managers. You can't bullshit your people, and people will then see. And Scott Galloway, who's another person who we're trying to land for our program, Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher have the Pivot podcast. For those of you who listen to it, it's amazing. For those of you who don't, you should listen to the last 3 of their podcasts, because they talk about businesses, and it's a very American lens, but businesses who selfishly, like airlines, who were doing buybacks of their shares to increase CEO salaries, etc., at the expense of their people, are now saying to governments, give us a big bailout. Now, if you think about it from our industry point of view, Publicis, WPP, the drastic reduction in those holding company networks, people are at the front line, people are the bottom line, they're the first people to go. And people are in the comms industry are expendable, which is ironic because those business models talk about people being their biggest asset. If people are your assets, you actually protect and invest in those people. What we are seeing, like Qantas, the national airline in Australia, they stood down, this is what's really important, they stood down 20,000 people yesterday. They didn't make them redundant. So you have businesses cross-pollinating with other businesses to redeploy their workforce that making people's roles redundant are the last resort. That's what's really interesting about purpose-led business today. And one of the things, and you'll see this playing out in your countries, because good civic leadership will catch on. So that's what's really interesting about watching how business plays out. But it's so scary, because whether your relationships or mortgages or renting, the business is normal where you don't have cash flow. That is the most, oh my God, part of how we're going to navigate through that change. And it does feel like the world is in like two different spheres. Even like Cannes in October, the Olympics being moved, the French Open. The world seems to think that we'll kick the can down the road for another 6 months, whereas everyone's thinking, shit, how do I actually just make it to April? So, you know, I've got 13 gray hairs and I'm turning 40 on Wednesday. And there's that sense of, I just want to make it through the next week. And that we totally understand that. So CCLP feels like 3 years away, and so does Cannes. But well, I promise you, whoever of you comes to Cannes, it'll be a lot more meaningful, because our program will be as up-to-date and relevant as possible. You know, this is not us selling you a program that we did 6 months ago going, ta-da, here you go. Like, it's about reinvention of everything. And that feels like that's the state of the business world right now.
Could you illuminate for others who maybe don't know what does it mean for them to stand down their employees?
Yeah, so standing down was looking at creative ways to handle a crisis, get government funding, and be more creative rather than just saying, we're making you redundant and we're taking you off our books, off our financial books. So that seems to be a very responsible way for businesses, because a lot of governments are saying, we can't turn the lights off the global economy. So in America, ironically for American politicians, very progressive, in like Democrat-led leadership and Republicans are saying, mortgage holders, we can't default on those. So learning lessons from the global economic crisis, for example, and that also exposes the freelance contract and gig economy, which have been neglected by a lot of businesses through legislation and a lot of government legislation to protect those people. Now you need stimulus packages, which actually says, if a freelancer and a contractor can't pay their mortgage or can't afford to survive, the economy suffers, gyms are going to close, and all the ripple effects in the economy. So standing down is a creative way that businesses are not making people redundant, because, and then in Germany, a term that I can't actually describe, sounds like Kausalzeiten, but it's not. But Marilia, you can explain it. But even the terms like, yes, governments are understanding the need to protect and conserve businesses of different scales, because they're understanding that people are vulnerable. That will increasingly become the new political strategy that governments play out. So, and thank God, because everyone needs help and support. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah, I can give you this example really quick. In Germany, and while we understand as leaders that depending on the situation, layoffs will be inevitable, thinking about creative solutions means also agreeing with everything that Barry said, looking for a collective agreement with your team. And in Germany, for example, there is a legal way now that it's called Kurzarbeit. This means short work, so that you can put your employees with less hours, but they still receive a part of their salaries from the government. And this is the way companies and medium and small size companies can use some benefits from the government. But I think, and also, of course, this depends on region and the situation of each business. But the key here, as Barry said, is to look for creative solutions and to find a collective agreement. One thing I really like about this Kurzarbeit is that everyone needs to agree, and you have to agree on the hours, because you say, okay, I will take 10 hours from this person and 10 hours from that, because I want to save one person in the team to be laid off. And while, of course, as Barry said, we cannot say as a leader, okay, laying off will not happen. But first, and this is first and foremost, those creative solutions, I think it's what we need at the moment.
If I was managing a team right now, there are two things that I would do. I would say to them, guys, we need to structure health and fitness as part of our day. I want you to tell me that you exercise for an hour and a half today, because by you doing that, it's healthy for your mental well-being. It's healthy for you, but also you'll be more productive when you re-engage. And then the second thing, whether this is Sevda or you know, Renata or Leo, like all these different people on the call, I think the most immediate thing you can encourage yourself and your teams to do is say, what are my passions and how do I monetize them? I love photography. You can see a gorilla on my top left shoulder. How do I monetize my photography? How do I use Skillshare? How do I sell my products on Etsy? It's actually bringing more hustle to bring more income flow in, because A, it will be more fulfilling for your passions, but B, people's vulnerability. If you're managing a team and you say to them, I want you to have a side hustle, you need to monetize that side hustle. Let's share what each of us are doing, because you're helping people address the vulnerability of income, but you're also saying to people, you need to hustle because these are crazy, uncertain times where none of us have the answers right now. People will respect you if you don't bullshit them and you go, you know what, we have to hustle and look for different directions, because people selling skills and advice and teaching and learning, like, you know, the podcast Sweathead and Mark Pollard, he interviewed me. I spoke about the Berlin School. People like Julian Cole, Mark Pollard, people who are generous in sharing, that is actually what's going to make our industry better. So that's what I would say to you guys and your teams. What are your passions? How can you monetize them? Because people want to sponge skills and learn, and you can make a lot of money doing that. But I've never done that. I've never thought about selling my photography or teaching my photography, but that is the new normal. And we all have to start thinking ourselves as little small businesses. But that is the one tip that I would give you guys. Well-being through exercise with your teams and structuring it unapologetically as part of your day. And then also conversely, having people monetize their skills outside of what you're paying them for. I think that is how we can lift everyone up.
I want to just add to that, because that was something else that you and Tracy discovered in your research, was that having a side hustle actually made people more engaged with their main job and kept them creatively sparking.
Yes, true. But CEOs and CFOs, they have an aneurysm when I say to them, do you agree with side hustles? Yes, we encourage everyone to have a side hustle. I say, great. And what percentage of your time in your business is being subsidized that your employee is working on other businesses? And everything's a conflict of interest now, because people are actively working. If they're employed for TBWA Paris, I bet you 100 cents in the dollar that person, there's a high percentage of your workforce that are working with your competitors and alternative businesses at night and on weekends, because they want to, because they feel like they should. So from a management point of view, that's a growing problem. From an employee point of view, everyone needs a side hustle. So yes, it does make you more engaged in your job, but people are also diversifying risk because they don't trust that they will have and keep their job. So, you know, the employee contracts that we sign are not worth the paper that they're written on anymore. But part of management is recognizing that and creating an environment that says, I know that this is happening. Tell me what you're working on so I can manage the conflict of interest internally. Because a lot of it comes down to trust, that people saying to you, I'm working on a brief for a project in Sweden and I live in Sydney, and just being honest and transparent with that. So a lot of that comes to just putting everything on the table, which is why managing and leading people is so hard today.
Indeed. Trust and vulnerability and safety, big keywords. And we are winding down now, and I think it's a great moment to let people speak up and ask their questions. Maybe they've been holding something back, waiting for the right moment, or give us their feedback.
AK, Christina, some M. Mattel. I know that there are humans on this line. What are you guys thinking? What are you feeling? Is what we've shared, is it relatable to what you're going through right now?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hello.
So, I just wanted to resonate, first of all, what you're saying. Yeah, that is true. You know, what all the main keywords that you use, as a, you know, because I found myself as a leader in my in the place I work, but you know, I haven't really crossed that line where I know that I'm a leader, and you know, where you are still one of the people. But what I found is that empowering people and letting them know that, yeah, you should have a side hustle, opens their mind up more. it kind of has a rippling effect on their lives and how they work for you. As an example, for example, if you have a graphic designer who does have the tools, for example, he has that juiced up laptop and he has that, you know, good camera that he could shoot other, you know, amazing pictures with, but he's just not on that track, you know. And when, and this I've seen as an example in my own real life, that when you kind of like steer him to use those tools, not particularly saying, okay, use the office tools for something else, I don't want to have a conflict there, but, you know, empower him, open his mind up, it reflected upon his creativity. So in an out-of-home industry, you're not necessarily having, you know, graphic designers that are, you know, gonna come up with a visual that is like out of this world, because most of the times they have brand messages that they, you know, just play with those PNGs available and, you know, give you that thing. But when you empower people to have a side hustle using the same talents that they need in their job, it kind of has a double effect. Yes, they do go into a side hustle, which is A, for them, and that's what a real leader does. He empowers humans and, you know, gives them more out of them. But when they get creative in that side hustle, they get creative in that work that they're supposed to be doing in their job. And, you know, it kind of has a double effect on it. So I don't know if you, it kind of does resonate to what you're saying. And I just wanted to put this out there, that it's not always that, you know, you should be afraid that your people are going to either leave. Yeah, that's always a chance, and good for them if they find their happiness in something else. But sometimes giving them that extra, you know, perspective towards life helps you by having them get more creative in what they do for you.
Absolutely. And also, frankly, it's just paying the bills. Like, people are saying, what do I need to do to pay my mortgage, to pay my rent, you know, to pay off my student loan? Like, this is where it's becoming ruthlessly practical, you know, and if you manage, the hard thing is, the more senior you become, the less time you have, the more money that you earn, the higher your costs and overheads. And now that the world's gone stop, that's the scary part, is not only you're encouraging your team to have side hustles, but what is your side hustle? What are you passionate about? God forbid you think about more than work. This is why it's such a confronting time for people, because no one's in control of anything. Whether you're the prime minister or the president of a country, and there's all these variables that you can't control, or you're just trying to hustle as a freelancer, this has become the new normal. So our theme for CCLP is ironically prescient, because that's exactly where business is at right now.
Okay, we have two questions. Yeah, exactly. One came on the everyone, but there was one that came in before who we should maybe give priority to. How do we maintain close relationships with clients nowadays? It's no more about drinking whiskey together in the John Draper style.
So the challenge is, how do you then step away from a screen? Because if you think about it, I hate my laptop more now than I did 2 weeks ago, because Zoom is now mandatory. The laptop has gone from watching Netflix on it and enjoying it to a device that's chaining me to a table. So with clients, the hardest thing actually is finding ways beyond a screen. And a lot of that actually comes down to phone calls and communication. And in different environments, in different cities where it's safe to do so, actually saying to a client, let's go for a walk at 1.5 meters distance. Or, you know, like, it's being funny, but it's actually going back to the simple things of actually having a relationship. And it also exposes the fact that some clients, you don't have a relationship with them. That's the only relationship you have is when the meetings are scheduled in a diary and you present work. It's like going into battle. That's the hard part, is that it really exposes the lack of trust and intimacy you have with the client now versus what you ideally should have. Conversely, clients and agencies that have strong relationships actually can thrive in this environment. They just shifted the way that they were communicating. So there's different polarities to that point.
We try and squeeze in the last question from Giovanna. We were in a moment of full globalization, and suddenly we start to see nations closing themselves. because of coronavirus to protect market or because their leaders' convictions, whatever. It's true. There's two strains going there at least. How do you think we will return to life after quarantine? More global or more locally centered?
In my own personal experience, what I see is like, there's two answers to that. There's the personal shift from, this is a business you work in, now you're working from home. The reintegration of people into a business, I actually think will be very uncomfortable for people on a local level. They'll walk in and go, oh shit, I'm working here again. Do I want to be here? So I think that you will see a lot of people resigning or leaving those jobs once business goes back to normal, because it'll be awkward and too structured for people. And then conversely, from a globalization point of view, and highlights the fact that you actually need other countries in order to get shit done. If you're traditionally used to working with a business that's headquartered in Europe or in North America, you realize how globalized the world is, that your client is not empowered at Coca-Cola in Australia and New Zealand to do their job because Singapore is shut down. Or if Singapore starts up again, that will then give permission for your market. So the globalized linkages, that's what's really interesting, is how everyone's codependent on each other. But that's also frustrating because you're not in control of those variables. So what I would suggest you do is reach out to people like me or like some of you on the call, like Enrique. I don't know what Enrique does, but if he's a freelancer, he has time and passion to utilize. How does Enrique lean into networks which can leverage people like him, freelancer networks? And how do you sell your skill sets on LinkedIn to differentiate? Because LinkedIn now has become a vanity project for leaders just trying to, those screenshots of all those different faces. Look at me, it's business as usual. Everyone's doing that. Everyone's communicating in the same way. So yeah, how do you differentiate and find your place in the new dysfunctional normal? It's a hard answer, but how do you make the most of meaning of where you're at now while keeping your head on and paying your bills? And then how do you reintegrate to what the new normal becomes? And do you want to be a part of that? That's what's going to be very scary for everyone as we transition away from the normal and then back into the new normal as well.
Well, unfortunately, I believe our time is up. Thank you all for participating. And I think we are going to collect some links for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, Marilia.
We will send some links of all the references we mentioned, the podcasts and the authors. So we'll send all this to you.
I hope everyone feels that they got some value. Speaking of value creation, that was a major topic, that it wasn't lipstick on a pig, but some value creation for you, and really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.
And communicate with us, guys. If you need anything from Marilia and I, if you have any questions, I'm sure you're probably thinking, how am I going to pay for Khan? Am I going to be in my business? There's lots of questions, but hopefully this conversation has given you enough trust to believe in what we're trying to do with CCLP for 2020, what 2019's look like. And this is about designing better people and having less assholes. So in our industry. And it's really like that simple. We want this to be the best experience professionally you've ever had. So hopefully you want to be a part of that.
So you all have my email. I would love to hear from you. Send your questions, your thoughts or feedback. And it's really great. It was 1 hour that really just went by.
Connect with us on LinkedIn. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Yeah. Communicate with us. And if you need opportunities, make that known, because our network in the Berlin School is all about the alumni and the family. There's huge value in the people that have come through the school. So yeah, happy to help anyone.